Hello, here's your worksheet. So something you might have measured in kilograms is a bag of flour. Something you might have measured in just plain grams would be a can of soup. Something you would measure in meters might be the yarn, whereas something smaller in centimeters, maybe pencil or the lead that goes in a mechanical pencil might be in millimeters. The hydrogen peroxide is the closest thing to liters in the classroom. Milliliters would be like a bottle of soda. Then when you go to the next part, you have to measure anything in the classroom. A door might be about 200 centimeters tall. So you would take a meter stick and you would measure the height of the door. If you measured yourself, you might be like 50 kilograms. And soap in the containers around the lab stations might be about 400 milliliters. So you just had to go and measure just different objects and what units you use to measure. There's no real right or wrong answer here. It's just more experimenting. Now, what would you use to measure the amount of stuff inside something? Similar to weight would be mass. Here were your options. Volume is how much liquid in a container, or sometimes it's how much gas is in a container, like a balloon. Solid is a bit tricky. In order to measure the volume, you might measure the length, the width, times the height. You would do that in math class. I'm sure they practice that. Another thing you would use is if you had a measuring cup full of water, well, not exactly full, and you drop an object in, the amount of water level that rises would be how much volume the object had. So if you want to measure the volume of a rock, how much space it takes up. The length or distance you would measure with length. All right, so then what metric unit would you use to measure length? You would use meter. A gram would be mass, and a liter would be volume, which would be similar to capacity. On the next worksheet, let's look at this one first. If you were counting in different, you know how you can count by tens, 10, 20, 30, 40, or you might count by hundreds or thousands. That's the metric amount, the place value. If you're not counting by tens, you're just counting by normal ones, you're not going to put a prefix. A prefix is kind of like kilo in front of meter. It just tells you the kilo means you're counting by 1,000. So this is the amount. It goes from 1,000, 100, 10, 1. Now if you take 1 meter stick and divide it into 10 parts, then it'd be a deci. 1 meter stick divided by 100 is a century, or a centi. There's 100 years in a century, and milli is taking it by 1,000. So you divide it into 1,000 parts. So then F, the animals in the prefixes are arranged by largest to smallest, and the pre means before, just like you take a pretest before unit. The kilo is a prefix that comes before meter. Meter tells you what type you're measuring in, distance, and then what you're counting by. So then it says the prefix hecto means you're counting by 100. What does the end root word mean? It tells you what type of measurement you're doing, capacity, mass, or distance. You can kind of get an idea from the chart above what this would be. And then true or false, the metric system counts by tens. Therefore, you can convert it easier than if you were to go from inches to feet. You just add a 0 if you were going to go from like decameters to hectometers. And 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters. This means that there are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. You can look at a ruler and you would find that to be true. Down here, deca and deci. If you look up here, deca and deci, I don't really know how to tell the difference. I think this has DA in front. So when you go down here, it counts by tens if you're using a decameter. Think of a deck on your house. You'd want it to be about 10 meter sticks long, or a decade has 10 years. Century, centipede, centimeter is all divided into 100 parts. 5 meters does not have a prefix, therefore you're just counting in the ones place. And the end root on milliliter tells you milli means small, 1,000th parts, and liter tells you you're measuring in volume, how much capacity or liquid space takes up. Micrometer is actually 1 millionth of a meter stick, or 1,000th of a millimeter. So that's itty bitty. So think of like a bacteria. Under the microscope, you would measure in micrometers. So this is the symbol. It's like Greek letter mu and an M behind it to tell you measuring a length. Now, with that in mind, we're going to go over to this page. I'm kind of doing them out of order. The other one was on the purple packet. Your teacher can pass it out and you can work on it in groups. A kilogram or kg is 1,000 grams. Therefore, a kilometer is also 1,000 meters. So kilo means 1,000. If you were lost in the woods and you had 3 meter sticks, the closest town was 3 kilometers away, then you would use 3,000 meter sticks. If there's 2 pounds in 1 kilogram, then a 400-pound bear would weigh 200 kilograms before eating you. And then it gets a little spicier. It says study meter stick is divided into 100 parts. So if you were to look at a meter stick, there would be 100 sections. So each one is 1 centimeter. Well, 1 meter stick has 100 centimeters. Each of these parts is called a centimeter. You would initial that cm. M tells you you're measuring meters. C would tell you what prefix you're counting by 100th, 100 parts. Make a connection. How many years in a century or how many cents in a dollar are each 100? So centi means 100. If you see the word meter at the end, you're measuring in length. Look at the ruler. How many millimeter marks are there? They're not numbered because there's so many. There's 1,000 on there. There are 10 in each centimeter, and there's 100 centimeters. So if you did the math, you would find that there are 1,000. So 100 centimeters, here's a centipede. It's got 100 legs, whereas a millipede has 1,000. So each of the centimeters has 10 millimeters on it. If you have 100 centimeters, each with 10 millimeters, then it'd be 1,000 total. A milliliter measures volume, and 1 liter is divided into 1,000 milliliters. Think of each one as a raindrop. So if you had 1,000 raindrops, that would be equal to 1 liter. Then down here, if you're dividing into 1,000 parts, it's a milli, 100 parts, it's centi. If it's only 10 parts, you take a meter stick divided by tens, then it may be a decimeter. That's when you start using your decimal. What animal would represent a kilometer? Well, that's kind of random because they're referring back to over here. You want to use a large animal. We use cow. Even though a cow does not start with a K, it starts with a C. We just use K to represent kilo, which starts with a K, meaning it's a very large animal. Now let's check one more worksheet. What prefixes are in front and what do they mean? So 1 meter divided into 100 smaller parts is a century. Counting in groups of 1,000 is kilo. 1 meter divided into 10 smaller parts is deci. Groups of 10 is deca, so if you had 10 meter sticks. 1 meter into 1,000 smaller parts is milli. This part gets a little weird. I don't know what I was doing when I wrote this section, but I think I was trying to get you to look at the abbreviations. So you would use a DL, but I think since you would have to throw an A in there. Decaliter. This one you don't really have an abbreviation, 2 of them, because it's just the ones place. You just use 1 letter. Deciliters. See, I screwed that up too. Centimeters, you use cm. Milligrams, I'm asking you for the part, so it's 1,000. So it's 1 gram divided by 1,000 parts. What's bigger, an inch or centimeter? Well, inches are bigger because there's 2.5 centimeters per inch. So if I was 5 inches tall, then you would take 5 times 2.5, and that would tell you how many centimeters tall I am, which would be a little over 10. All right. Guess if the metric system is called the international system or system international, if you had an accent, because all the countries know it. It's easier to use. Only the countries that were founded by Britain, you know how we had to fight for a revolution in the United States to fight for our freedom from Britain? We still use the King's measuring system in feet and inches, whereas all the other countries use the metric system. So if you were doing research with other countries, you would want to share metric. Otherwise, you'd have to do messy conversions. The length of a pencil, you'd probably use centimeters. A meter stick would be way too big. And kilo, yeah. 100 meter sticks would be a hectometer. Okay, on this part, you're going to actually look for this line and find out where it measures to. You see it's at 1 centimeter, but it goes over 1 centimeter. So 1.2, which if you counted is also the same as 12 millimeters. You would do this one on your own. Here, this says if you are measuring how much liquid is in this graduated cylinder, It'd be 7 milliliters because it's not quite to 10. What you're going to want to do is look at this little bubble. The bottom of the bubble is where you're going to measure. That's called your meniscus. It's a bubble of water. You look at the bottom when reading at eye level. Over here, you're measuring a scale. This one's done for you, 436. How did I get that? You start with 400. Tens place is 30, so 4, 30, and then 6 is the ones place. And then you're going to measure your thermometers. If you notice down here, it's counting by 0.1. So on the middle one, you see 1, and then 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, blah, 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 up to 4 points. Should be 8, shouldn't it? Yeah. Oops. All right, and then this one it tells you. Then I wanted you to compare to the Fahrenheit system. So water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. In the metric, it's 0, a little easier. Water boils at 212 in the Fahrenheit system. At Celsius, it's 100. Again, a little easier. It shows you over here. Room temperature is 70 in the Fahrenheit, 20 degrees in Celsius. So something like a fish tank is at 20 degrees Celsius. Don't think that it's very cold. It's actually quite warm. Done.